Hello, everyone, and welcome to this ISM webinar on the Copyright and AI Consultation. My name is Ed Phelan, and I'm the Knowledge Hub and Resources Manager at the ISM. To describe myself for the purpose of accessibility, I'm a white male wearing a green jumper with brown hair with a white background behind me. Before we begin the webinar, just a few bit of housekeeping to note. Please do introduce yourself to your fellow attendees in the chat box. Let us know what your role in this music is and where you're joining us from. During the presentation, please feel free to ask questions using the Q&A function below. We'll do our best to get to these at the end. And do keep an eye on the chat box where we'll be dropping some useful links to the consultation. If you wish to use them, subtitles are available to enable at the bottom of your screen. Also, please note that this webinar is being recorded and we will share the recording with you afterwards, as well as a feedback survey, and we'd be very grateful if you could fill it out. So to start off today, we're going to be running through the consultation and how to respond to it. We'll be looking at what a consultation is, how it works, why it's important to respond, what is AI, what are the key issues today, and then how to respond to the consultation using our members guidance page. So first off, what is a consultation and how does it work? So a consultation is a process of inviting people to share their views on any issue to help inform decision making. In this case, government consultations are generally open to the public and they're designed to seek views from people who have a particular interest in the policy that the topic is considered. So this might be people directly affected by AI and copyright, in this case, people like musicians, composers, and artists. And it might be people with knowledge of the subject area, so business leaders, organization leaders, might be music organizations leaders. There's no set format for responding to the consultation, but specific questions have been provided to guide respondents. This consultation will be open to the 25th of February. Generally speaking, government departments and other bodies should be able to demonstrate how these responses have helped guide decision making. So why is it important to respond to the consultation? There may not be another opportunity to have your voice heard and your concern heard through the government. This gives you an opportunity to have a say on the future of your career and the music industry. Policymakers and government do not always have a direct line of contact with musicians and creatives, and this gives them an opportunity to hear from you. They will be hearing from tech companies and AI developers as well, so it's important to have your say to counteract the influence from those companies. The key motivation here for us is to stand up for musicians, and music, and then to take the consultation as it is and answer what we believe is best for musicians. I'm going to hand over now to Rachel, who will discuss AI.
Hi everyone, I'm Rachel. For accessibility purposes, I'm a white female with dark hair wearing a dark jumper with a white background. Just to say to begin with that historically the music industry has always welcomed technology and innovation and has consistently adapted to those new technologies. And AI is no different. There are many benefits to having this technology available. It's already providing valuable assistive tools that enhance music creation and production. For instance, AI has been used to isolate stems from mixed tracks. It's improved live performance sound processing. It's restored old recordings. And on the business side, we see AI-driven recommendation systems, which can help match listeners with new artists and AI-powered analytics to help insights into listener behavior, marketing strategies, tour planning, and that kind of thing. However, the rapid rise of generative AI raises serious concerns, particularly regarding copyright, fair remuneration, and protection of human creativity, which is what this consultation is all about. So unlike assistive AI, which supports human creators, generative AI creates music itself faster and far more cheaply than a human can. The key issue here is that generative AI models cannot function without first being trained on vast amounts of data. And that's usually high quality, in the case of music, high quality music created by human artists. And this is done through a process known as text and data mining. This process involves copying, analyzing, and learning from existing works in order to generate new outputs that compete directly with the music that inspired them or that they were trained on. This raises fundamental questions about ownership, copyright infringement, control of rights, licensing opportunities, and fair compensation in the creative industries. And this is where copyright plays a critical role. Copyright exists to protect creative works, to incentivize creativity, and to ensure that creators are fairly compensated when their work is used. Copyright law is a permissive system, meaning that when you create music, it is protected immediately. And as first author, you have the right to copy and exploit that work, but you also have the right to prevent others from doing so. So copyright does not currently permit AI companies unrestricted access to protected works for commercial exploitation. If AI developers can mine music without permission, which is what the government's proposing, and use it to generate competing works, then they're undermining the very foundation of copyright law. And that's why today's consultation is so important. We need to ensure that copyright continues to serve its intended purpose to protect music creators, safeguard their careers and livelihoods, ensure fair payment, and maintain a thriving creative economy where human creativity is valued. So the copyright and AI consultation covers a broad range of issues, but there are three key areas that require urgent attention from music creators. The first being the government's proposal to introduce a text and data mining copyright exception for commercial use with an opt-out system, the lack of transparency of AI training data sets, and the rise of digital replicas, which is often referred to as voice cloning or fake artists. And we strongly encourage members to respond to these critical issues specifically to help shape fair and sustainable policies for the future of music. So to start with, the government is considering a copyright exception that would allow AI developers to mine copyrighted works without requiring permission. So this is unless rights holders actively choose to opt out of that copyright exception. And at first glance, this might seem like a reasonable compromise, but in practice, opt-out models do not provide real control. The burden of enforcement is going to fall entirely on individual creators who must first become aware that their work is being used and then navigate a complex and resource-intensive process to prevent that from happening. This is particularly unworkable in the music industry where songs exist across multiple platforms, multiple territories, different formats. For example, a single track could be streamed on multiple platforms. It can be downloaded, it can be broadcast, it can be covered, it can be sampled, it can be remixed across thousands of different sources. So expecting musicians to locate and opt out of every version of every work is simply impractical. And even if a creator successfully opts out, AI models cannot unlearn the data they've already processed. So once the work has been used in training, it continues to shape AI generated outputs indefinitely. And this means that even with an opt-out system, musicians still have no meaningful way to stop AI developers from benefiting from their work without permission or payment. The UK's proposed opt-out model mirrors a system that's been introduced in the EU. It was introduced through the Copyright Directive in the digital single market in 2019. However, in practice, evidence shows that this system hasn't worked. It's failed, with many rights holders unaware that they needed to opt out, and that tended to result in their works being used without permission, even when the rights were reserved. AI developers seemingly want to ignore opt-out clauses, and enforcement of this system has been extremely weak or non-existent. The only effective solution really is to uphold and enforce the existing copyright framework, which requires AI developers to seek permission before using copyrighted works. So licensing is the only mechanism that ensures fair remuneration and protects musicians' ability to control how their work is used. So if AI is to coexist with the music industry, it must do so on fair and sustainable terms that respect the rights of human creators. Moving on to transparency, this is about the lack of transparency around how AI models are trained. So trust between AI developers and rights holders really depends on knowing exactly what kind of works have been used in training data sets. However, currently at the moment, most AI companies are refusing to disclose what copyrighted works have been used. So transparency is really important for three reasons. Firstly, it enables licensing to occur in the first place. So AI developers should not be able to exploit music for free while refusing to engage in proper licensing agreements. If they disclose their training data, collecting societies, publishers, and artists can negotiate deals and ensure that musicians are compensated for the use of their work. It also allows rights holders to enforce their rights. If a musician doesn't know that their work is being used, they have no way to take action against unauthorized use. Right now, AI developers are operating in secrecy, which makes it nearly impossible for creators to challenge any infringement that occurs. It also protects against market exploitation. AI-generated music is already competing with human-made works. Without transparency, musicians have no way to know if their songs are being used. The government really need to introduce legally binding transparency obligations that are strictly regulated and enforced. Without transparency, AI developers will continue to exploit copyrighted works without oversight, and this will leave music creators unable to protect their livelihoods moving forward. And finally, another urgent issue is digital replication, the use of AI to imitate a person's voice, image, or distinctive musical performance style. AI-generated deep fakes are already capable of replicating artist voice to create entirely new songs that were never recorded by them. AI can also mimic a musician's unique performance style, reproducing phrasing, tone, and performance techniques of instrumentalists as well as vocalists. And this raises serious concerns about unauthorized digital impersonation and the erosion of creative identity. Some countries are introducing personality right protections, and the UK currently lacks any specific legal safeguards that prevent AI companies from cloning a musician's voice or performance style without consent. Copyright law may only apply if a protected sound recording was used in training without consent. We do also have the tort of passing off, but this requires proof of misrepresentation and damage to goodwill, which makes it really complex and quite uncertain as a legal route for musicians who need to protect their artistic identity. Without any strong legal protections against digital replicas, musicians risk losing control over their voices and performances, and audience also risk being misled by AI-generated deep fakes. So the UK has to introduce some kind of law, like a personality right, to ensure that individuals can retain control over their likeness, sound, and performance style, and that clear legal frameworks are in place to prevent any AI-driven exploitation. Back to you, Ed.
Thanks, Rachel. So now we're going to look at how we actually respond to the consultation. It's quite a technical document with 52 questions, but we've provided a page that provides guidance to our members. So I'm going to show you how to do that now. Share screen here. Okay, so this is our members guidance page. To find this page, it should be linked in the chat now, but if you go onto ism.org, you can click on this banner, have your say on the future of music and AI before the 25th of February. Clicking there will bring you to the page. This is a quick description of the issues that we just talked about. If you look over here, you'll have a content section, which will make more sense in a second. But it's this final paragraph here will give you access to the consultation document. So you can click this link and you will have this document. This is the government provided document, which lists out all the key concerns and questions and their reasoning behind it. The second link here will be the response form on the citizen space, which will look like this. This is broken into different categories with different amount of questions in each category. We've taken the 13 most prominent questions we believe for our members, but when you're filling out this response, you can fill out as many as you want. If you feel like there's some questions you don't want to answer, don't answer them. If you want some more questions, please do. I'm going to show you just quickly the basic information question, which has to be filled in as a requirement. It's your name, your email address, and what it says is organization. If you're a freelancer here, you might put down freelance composer, freelance musician, studio musician, whatever your occupation is. Or if you're working or applying part of an organization, you might put your organization name down there. Yeah. So if we go back here, we've broken our content section down the same way as the consultation response page. So you might click here it will bring you to the first question. And if you click on the consultation response, you can click on copyright and artificial intelligence, and you'll see question 4, 5. And we have our supplied responses we think might be useful to you and topics you might want to discuss in your response. I'm going to hand over to Rachel to start us off, and then I'll take over in a minute.
Thanks, Ed. So the first question that you're going to come across is probably one of the most important to submit a response to. It's about the government's proposed option 3, which is a data mining exception, which allows rights holders to reserve their rights supported by transparency measures. So this is the proposal the government is making to introduce a new copyright exception for commercial use, with the option for creatives to opt out of that copyright exception. So we firmly believe that musicians should not have to reserve their rights. And you will see if you scroll down here in the blue box, it will tell you the main points that you might want to include in your own response. It's really important, of course, you put that in your own words. The key things to include is that it places an unfair burden on creators, that you need to become aware that opting out is necessary, that you need to navigate a complex and unclear process in order to prevent that from happening. It's really important to get across that the burden should be on AI developers to ask permission to use your works rather than you having to take those measures to opt out of that copyright exception. Moving down to question 5, what option do you prefer? Again, in your own words, of course, whatever you want to respond is fine. We strongly believe option 1 is the only way forward, which is about strengthening copyright and using existing legal and economic frameworks in the music industry that would require licensing in all cases. And again, in the blue box, you'll see some key points to respond. The main point, I suppose, to get across is that any works that are created by AI are going to compete with music creators in the market. And so licensing really is the only opportunity at the moment to make sure that you are fairly compensated if that happens. Also, having the choice to license means that you have the choice not to let AI companies use your works. The next section, question 6, do you support the introduction of an exception along the lines outlined in section C of the consultation? Really just reflects question 4. So your response could be quite similar here. Question 8, if not, what other approach do you propose and how would you achieve the intended balance of objectives? Again, that's just to re-emphasize that we advocate for option 1, which is just to strengthen existing copyright law and licensing frameworks. Then moving on to question 9, what influence, positive or negative, would the introduction of an exception along these lines have on you or your organization? Again, it's really important that you get your response over in your own words, but there are some key points to consider, such as licensing, the fact that AI-generated music will create unfair competition, and that an opt-out system doesn't provide meaningful control or protection. The next section is on contracts and licensing. So question 16, does the current practice relating to the licensing of copyright works for AI training meet the needs of creators and performers? The fact is we already have very strong licensing frameworks in place in the music industry. And so, yes, copyright law and licensing systems in the UK are already fit for purpose. Again, in the blue box, there are some notes that, if you have had any experience with licensing agreements, either directly or through publishers or production music library companies with AI companies and AI developers, then you might want to share your perspective and your experience there in your response to question 16. Question 17, where possible, please indicate the revenue cost that you or your organization receives per year for this licensing under current practice. If you have received any royalties or any license fee payments and you wish to share that information, question 17 would be the place to do that. If you don't want to disclose any earnings or you haven't received any money, you can just leave that question blank. Transparency. Do you agree that AI developers should disclose the sources of their training material? We firmly believe that they should. And of course, again, in your own words, you can get that message across that We need to know what copyright protected works have been used in training data in order to license effectively and to prevent and take action against any copyright infringement. Question 23, what level of granularity is sufficient and necessary for AI firms when providing transparency? This is really about what information you need to know in order to license effectively. So we're asking AI developers to provide full publicly available lists of data sets and sources used for training, including date and timestamps that indicate when that data was scraped. Okay, Ed, back to you.
Great, thanks. Yeah, and it's just good to point out that if you can put this into your own words, as Rachel was saying, that would be great. If you feel like you don't have time or you don't have the expertise to put it into your own words, just taking the response we have here and submitting it is also a worthwhile cause, just so the government can see how many people care about the issue. So just on encouraging research and innovation, does the existing data mining exception for non-commercial research remain fit for purpose? So currently there is a concern that there is a loophole where data can be scraped from by AI developers without permission. So we believe that licensing and transparency is the only way to close that loophole. You also might want to address different way or like the importance of closing this loophole as a right holder and remuneration. Question 43, infringement and liability relation to AI generated content. So does the current approach to liability in AI generated outputs allow effective enforcement of copyright? So no, it's not effective enforcement. The mechanisms are not available at the moment. Transparency is the only thing that will allow people to be able to see where their data is being trained, where their music is used, and who's using their music. You might also want to emphasize that AI developers must be held accountable if their models produce infringing content. Question 45 about labeling. Do you agree that generative AI outputs should be labeled as AI generated? If so, what is proportionate approach and is regulation required? So yes, we believe that labeling of AI generated content is essential to ensure transparency. It allows the rights holders to know that their music is being used. It allows the audience to know if they're listening to AI generated music, and allows businesses to know what they're buying if they're paying for music or anything like that. In your own words, you might want to explain how labeling protects your work and make sure there's no unfair competition as well. Question 48 around digital replicas. To what extent would the approaches outlined in the first part of the consultation in relation to transparency and text and data mining provide individuals with sufficient control over the use of their image and voice in AI outputs? So the current approach does not provide sufficient control. It does not provide sufficient transparency either. And transparency is very important to know when your voice is being used and your likeness is being used. It's very hard to spot imitation, especially in music, and musicians are very vulnerable to imitation. In a response, you might want to describe how musicians are vulnerable, talking about musical styles and how they can be copied, how the timbre of a voice can be copied, the timbre of an instrument, and stuff similar to that. Question 49 is where you get to share some experiences you might have of AI and digital replicas to date. There's a few famous cases, notably of Drake and The Weeknd. You can see in the key points to consider below. But if you have any experience yourself, you might have seen a song covered by a dead artist, a modern song where they use AI. You might see a lot of that at the moment, people like Elvis singing different songs. So you can talk about that, or if you have experience of people at the moment or yourself where you have a digital replica has been made of you. Other points to consider down here is unauthorized commercial use of your replicate. Independent and lesser known artists are also very vulnerable as AI tools can scrape publicly available recordings to create digital replicas without their knowledge often. And deepfake performances and AI generated collaborations can create confusion among audiences and potential financial loss. You might end up seeing yourself doing a collaboration with an artist that you don't want to do a collaboration with, and your fans mightn't know if it's you or not. So that is it. So take all of those questions, try and reply to them as much as you can. Again, you go over here in the consultation. And if I just go back here, for that last question, you might go down to digital replicas. You click here, it brings up the question, and you can provide your own views. You can base it off our question or answer that we've made. And great. And then when you've finished your response, if you can click this button here, I've submitted my response, just so we know how many people from the ISM page have submitted a response. Great. We're going to go over some pre-submitted question now, but if you have any questions, please do question box down below. But to start us off with a question here, I want to know why government hasn't consulted musicians and writers, because it's our work that's going to be pirated. It is our work, and this is our chance. This is why it's so important to submit your response. This consultation is your chance to have your voice heard. It is them consulting musicians. And while it's quite a technical document, which might turn some people off, it's really important to provide whatever kind of response you can do and show your experiences as well. I might throw this question over to Rachel. Can AI affect anything I've already published on Amazon?
Yeah, so really you need to be careful of anything that you've made publicly available on the internet. So anything that is freely accessible on the internet can be mined by AI companies. It might be that you have works that are behind a paywall. And there is this thing called lawful access, which means so long as someone has paid a subscription fee or bought a copy of your book or your music, then they have lawful access to that, and therefore they can scrape it as well. So if you have works that are on Amazon or any similar platform, including streaming services and things like that, in theory, all of that is vulnerable to being scraped by AI. So yes, anything you have already published on Amazon is vulnerable.
Right. Another question here, it's more of a comment. So intellectual property needs to be protected, including your physical voice, the unique sound you make when you play. Yeah, so this will be pointing towards our digital replica question. How do you protect that voice? What do we need? We need transparency to know when your voice is being used. And that's really important. If there's no transparency, you cannot prove that it is your likeness being used. You can't prove that they trained off of your voice or the unique way you play an instrument. So it's really important to show how vulnerable musicians are. Another question we have here. I'll throw this to you, Rachel, but it's kind of similar to the previous one. How is the government planning on protecting our rights as teachers, musicians, and creators?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. At the moment, we don't know. The government are putting the message across that they want to protect musicians and they want to protect creators and teachers. And that's really, again, what this consultation is about. The government are very keen to find a balance between allowing innovation to continue to develop in the AI sphere, but they stated that they are trying to make sure that musicians and creators retain control over their works and that they are fairly compensated. And really, at the moment, it's just about making sure that our opinions and our voices are heard and that your voices are heard to make sure that that message that we want to retain control, we want to be fairly compensated, we want the choice of whether we want to give our creative works up to AI training or not, it is really important. So at the moment, the first step is to make sure that we respond to the consultation, as many of us as possible, to get that message across. And then it's about ensuring that whatever decision government makes beyond this consultation, that we continue to advocate for musicians' rights and creative rights.
Question here, given we are successful in this campaign, how would law be enforced? This is a very tricky one. I suppose the most important thing is to make law enforceable, which requires transparency and a certain degree of transparency. So people can bring court cases and very clearly show that data has been scraped without permission. The actual enforcement of it, it's very hard to tell, especially with tech companies using data for free and going to court cases, which they have been doing for the last 15 years. Do you have any thoughts on that, Rachel?
It may well be that these things are decided in court. Again, as you said, Ed, I think transparency is key, and really that's what possibly we need to be fighting for primarily before we start thinking about any kind of copyright exceptions It's really about making sure that AI companies are legally bound to be transparent about the data they're using. So we know already that voluntary agreements don't work in this sphere. AI companies tend to, or any tech company tends to pull out of any voluntary agreements that they make over issues like transparency. So we want to encourage the government to make sure that any transparency obligations that are put in place are legally binding.
Just a question here, a live question. Do you know what the major labels and PRS are saying on this matter? Have they publicly said they disagree with the opt-out policy? So the creative community has come together and in large does disagree that opt-out just isn't workable for musicians. It will require musicians to constantly be doing administration of their whole catalog, finding out where it's been used, opting out of multiple streaming services and multiple AI developers. So at the moment, that is the stance. But for us, we care about the musicians and their livelihood, and it's important to fight against opt-out where possible. Another question. Do we know the timeline from the submission of our opinions to when we will know the outcome? No, we don't exactly. There is also an AI opportunities plan that has been launched for growth in the UK, which covers some of the stuff that is in the consultation. How that is implemented, I suppose we will know the outcome of the consultation. Another question here. Will local action in this area be redundant if there are not legally binding international agreements? Might give this to you, Rachel.
This is again a really tricky one to answer. I think it is really important to understand that copyright law is not really harmonized internationally. We do have international treaties that attempt to harmonize copyright law, and I think possibly the next step after dealing with UK law is to try and get some kind of international harmonization on approaches to AI. There are some concerns that obviously the big tech companies are based in the US, and any kind of scraping or training that happens is really restricted to whatever law is in place in the country where that scraping and training happens. So there are concerns about jurisdiction. However, I think, we have a real opportunity here to set a precedent for what's right for the creative industries. And it's a really pivotal time at the moment. And again, that's why this consultation is so important and why we should all be responding to this consultation to make sure that we don't set the wrong precedent and that we can lead a path for the future with AI and between the AI and the creative industries that is, you know, fair to musicians and creators to make sure that we don't destroy an industry which is incredibly valuable, not only to our own country, but to every country. We're talking about cultural heritage, the implications could be huge. So the UK, with this consultation, has a real opportunity now to start setting a precedent for those international obligations.
Live question here. This consultation is presumably just for ISM members to respond to. How can fellow musicians who aren't members get involved? So this is an open consultation to the entire public. So anyone directly affected by AI and copyright should be responding. So that's all creatives, people who work in tech, AI developers, everyone like that is going to be responding. Our members' guidance is open to the public as well. So I direct them to that page or just to the public consultation page if they want to have a go at it themselves. But I would definitely recommend everyone to get in touch with their peers, their colleagues, whether they're part of the ISM or not, and encourage them to respond. It's the whole creative industry that is at risk here, not just ISM members. And it's important to remember as well that AI generated content will compete with musicians. So even if you feel like you aren't directly impacted with it, maybe you don't have a lot of royalties coming in from your streaming services or copyright money, they're going to be making music that will compete with your output. Another question here. I've lost it. Oh yeah, does this consultation only concern audio, or is this also concerning videos of us performing? Could deepfake videos be made of us performing? Rachel, do you want to go with this?
Yes, absolutely. It can affect video. So when an AI system scrapes the data, that data can be in many different forms. So it could be, in the case of music, it could be MIDI files, it could be audio files, and of course it could be video files as well. So yes, any kind of audio or audio visual content that you're putting on the internet that is publicly available is vulnerable to being mined for data.
Just as well in that chat, if you're interested in the views of other publishers or music organizations, Colin in the chat there has posted a link to CRAC, which is the Creative Rights in Artificial Intelligence Coalition, which the ISM is a member of. And all the organizations there sign up to very similar principles as us. We're just using this particular webinar to show you how to respond to the consultation. Do we have any more questions before we finish up?
Can I add something? Obviously,
Yeah.
there are a lot of teachers attending the webinar today, and I just want to reiterate what Ed said about, you might not feel that this directly impacts your work, but we also need to think about what's going to happen 5 or 10 or 15 years into the future with regards to the talent pipeline, with regards to funding of arts and music education, which is, all of these areas in the music industry are already vulnerable and already suffering in many ways due to many different reasons. AI is only going to exacerbate that in the future. If if young people that you might be teaching feel like there's no career path for them because AI does it all for you, then you're going to have less pupils to teach. There's going to be less funding for education. So even if it doesn't directly impact you as far as copyright and royalties are concerned, we still feel it's really important that you respond to this consultation thinking of the bigger picture and what this could look like in 5 or 10 years' time.
Great. Thanks everyone for joining us today. If you have any further questions or want anything clarified, please do email us at the ISM at membership@ism.org. Thanks for joining us, and please reach out if there's any difficulty, and thank you. Hope you found this session very informative. Please do fill out the post-webinar survey. We appreciate your feedback. It helps us to improve our services. And do let us know if there's anything about AI that you would like clarified, or in a future survey, or in any kind of your membership guidance or advice pages. This webinar recording will be sent to you by email and available to watch on our website. Finally, thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you at another ISM webinar soon. Thanks a million.